Pathways is a government-funded propaganda game set in the UK, where a non-binary teenager named Charlie must navigate the dangers of the internet and the far right. The objectives of the game, according to the creators, are to encourage learning about extremism and radicalization, while equipping young people with an understanding of the support available. The game is intended for children as young as 11, with the website even offering a lesson plan for teachers. It's all funded by Prevent, a program from the UK Home Office's Counter-Terrorism Unit, with which you can use to report people and have them hauled away for deprogramming, to mixed results. With the knowledge that the game is intended for 11-year-olds, the most insidious thing about Pathways is the way it frames the issues. Charlie is sent an edgy Instagram reel, and if you download it, the game warns you that downloading or streaming certain content can lead to a terrorist offense conviction. The correct action was to tell a trusted adult, in this case his mother, despite the fact that Charlie is currently attending college, meaning he's somewhere between 16 to 18. However, if you don't download it and also choose not to run to mommy, the game tells you anyway about how viewing certain content can lead to terrorism convictions. The point of the game is to scare children into subservience. Charlie likes to post on social media about a group defending English rights. Then, in the middle of the night, he's added to a scary encrypted private chat full of terrorists without his consent. His cute girlfriend Amelia urges him to visit a rally protesting the erosion of British values. And if you choose to go and witness things, not even joining in, he'll have to run from cops as the line between observing and participating was too easy to cross. It's also impossible to ignore the racial component here. Charlie is snubbed a job opportunity in favor of an ethnic minority. Amelia tells him that this is evidence immigrants are coming to the UK and stealing their jobs, and she's supposed to be in the wrong as Charlie got a lower score than the other student. But acting as if it's just a meritocracy is a joke, when the fact is native-born British whites are snubbed for opportunities in favor of ethnic minorities. You could have swapped the scores of Charlie and the brown girl and you'd have the same results. In fact, it'd be notably more realistic that way. But part of propaganda is demoralization. Charlie is actively dumber than the brown girl, and so he lashes out in anger and ignorance, and you don't want to be like Charlie, do you, kids? An even less subtle example is when Charlie sees a viral video on social media, which claims that Muslims are stealing the place of British war vets in terms of emergency accommodations. If you don't engage, the next video Charlie sees shows a veteran and a dog moving into a new home that was provided as a community initiative. You'll note that despite what the game claims, this doesn't counter the prior statement. If anything, it's complimentary. This veteran wouldn't need a new home from the community if the government didn't eject him in favor of Muslims. Meanwhile, if you engage with the post or choose to look into it, Charlie finds a bunch of resources regarding white replacement. The game notes how Charlie began intaking lots of harmful ideological messages. In fact, some of the groups were actually illegal. So looking into things and doing your own research is dangerous, but also the game doesn't contest the message because it can't. The UK does prioritize foreigners over native-born whites, to the extent that the Manchester arena bombing was allowed to happen as the staff wanted to avoid racism complaints, and almost 1,500 little girls were targeted and abused in Rotherham alone because interfering might be perceived as racist. Fuck all that though, the community scraped together what they could after the government threw out the vets, so it's all okay despite migrant hotels destroying small towns in England and its parasitical residents harassing young girls, all on taxpayer dime. The term that comes to mind is predictive programming, rather the practice of conditioning an audience to act a certain way by normalizing and depicting things in media. If you make all the right choices, you're ostracized by your friends and Amelia drops you as you don't share the same values. However, the game provides rewards for Charlie. If you don't chimp out over the minority kid, the teacher finds more opportunities for Charlie despite his failing grades. If you don't visit the rally, Charlie instead spends time with his father, divorced of course, and he is reassured about not going. The point that the game is making is that bigotry is a defensive mechanism and a replacement for meaningful relationships, which you could be indulging in if you weren't a freaking racist. However, this is comically insulting when you remember just who are the ones making life difficult for the native whites. Charlie wouldn't need further job opportunities if the government didn't import millions of immigrants in the past few years, dropping the British population under 70% while it was 95 in the 90s. Charlie wouldn't have to worry about the cops ruining his life at a rally if the cops were less focused on policing speech and more interested in stopping ethnic grooming gangs and the targeted rape of white girls. And in a better society, there wouldn't even be a rally about restoring Britain, and Charlie wouldn't have to choose between going or seeing his father because his parents would still be be together. The people who destroyed Charlie's future and the future of incoming British generations are the same people who made the game, rubbing it in your face and giving you bullshit ways to cope with what they've done. It's time to take a look at the organization behind the game, Prevent. The game claims that Prevent was founded after the 9/11 attacks and works on the basis that any ideology can be harmful, and therefore anyone can be at risk of becoming radicalized, even claiming how they don't target any specific demographic, community, or ideology. You may find it conspicuous, then, that the game explicitly has a racial component, and only pertains to the concerns of native whites. If you somehow couldn't tell, the game is very thinly veiled anti-white propaganda. This should come as no surprise, of course. You may recall an award-winning series last year named Adolescence, where a 13-year-old white boy named Jamie kills a female classmate, and the whole series is based around his heroic black counselor trying to solve a problem of white incel violence. Now, if you know anything about the UK, you'd know that white incels rank fairly low on the list of groups to worry about, but Prime Minister Keir Starmer disagrees, calling the series a very good documentary, and proudly stating how he forced his teenage son to watch it with him, even saying how he'd support showing the thing in schools to combat toxic misogyny early on. See, Keir Starmer really cares about violence against girls, especially sexual violence, and that's why he accused people who wanted an inquiry on the grooming gangs of being far right, until it became politically expedient for him to support such a thing. On the broader subject of Prevent and violence against girls, it may interest you to know that Prevent has a referral program, which can be used to snitch on your neighbors if you suspect them of possibly being extremists. This has been used to great effect when it comes to reporting right-wingers. In fact, there have been more right-wing referrals for extremism than Islamist referrals for extremism. One particular case to note, however, is when it comes to the Rwandan schoolboy Axel Rudakabana. Between 2019 and 2021, Rudakabana's teachers referred him to Prevent 3 separate times on account of bringing knives to school, assaulting and trying to stab other students, and harboring an interest in genocide and shootings. Prevent rejected these appeals, and in 2024, Rudakabana then went on to conduct a mass stabbing, killing 3 little girls and putting 6 others and 2 adults in critical condition. In all, Rudakabana stabbed 13 people. The youngest victim was only 6 years old, and Rudakabana stabbed her 122 times. When Rudakabana was apprehended, he simply said that he was glad the girls were dead. Prevent could have stopped him. Really, any sensible person would have detained him the moment they saw him, but they were far more interested in focusing on more pressing matters, such as the British populace reading books from fringe authors like C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, and George Orwell. Don't worry though, Prevent was involved in the process afterwards, namely in covering it up. See, after every ethnic-related terror attack, there's always this outpour of support for the ethnic communities, who are obviously the real victims in those situations. It's always this maudlin, manipulative kumbaya shit. Don't look back in anger. Pay no attention to the fact that we just flooded the English countryside with the exact demographic that killed all those people. That right there is the efforts of Prevent and the Riku unit. Now, ostensibly, Riku ought to be used to psyop Muslims into not slaughtering white people, but as we saw with the Prevent referrals, that's not what actually happens. You'll notice that whenever there's a terrorist attack, there's always a bunch of hashtags and signs and just this concerted astroturfed effort to move on, to not hold groups accountable. That is Prevent and Riku. The equivalent over here in the States is the Community Relations Service, created in the 60s with the Civil Rights Act and defunded at the end of 2025. The stated mission is to prevent and resolve racial and ethnic tensions, incidents, and civil disorders, and restore racial stability and harmony. I'll let you decide the effectiveness of this office, considering it's been in place for 60 years, and we're about 2 Fen ODs away from a race war, but consider that the purpose of a system is what it does. When a future doctor culturally enriches a young white guy, and then his family comes out and says it's not about race, that's the Community Relations Service. Maybe not every time, after all we currently live in the most propagandized age in history, but you'll notice it only ever goes one way, and you'd best believe that's the intention. It was certainly about race to the aspiring doctor and his people, as they made him ludicrously wealthy, but for you, white heritage American, who gives a fuck about you? You care about whites as an identity group? Okay, you fucking Nazi. Returning to Pathways, it's an anti-white psyop. That's the point. You may think it's a bad one, as the main takeaway online is that becoming a far-right extremist gets you a cute goth GF, but what about the 11-year-olds who are shown this in schools? It's the subtle things, really. Charlie has no agency, and his actions are all at the behest of women. His mother is a wholesome alternative to the dangers of the internet. Amelia makes him based, yet suddenly disappears in his time of need, and in the end, his teacher grooms him, referring him to Prevent. Charlie's father is barely in the picture, and with the exception of the diversity student, everyone is white until the very end when Charlie is referred, upon which every authority figure from that point onward is some kind of minority. Charlie's assigned mentor figure isn't, though. He's given a reformed white guy who is just like him to keep him on the right track. But what even was the wrong track according to the game? If you pick all the bad options, Charlie downloads and shares an edgy meme. He doesn't like affirmative action. He doesn't like that the government favors foreigners over its citizens. He joins a group with an IRL friend of his, and he goes to a rally protesting the erosion of British values, which that phrase specifically is a buzzword from the 2000s in favor of foreigners assimilating. There's nothing radical here. It's all within a regime-approved framework. Yet the game tells children that these horrible choices will ruin their lives, and you need daddy government to help explain the world to you, just like how Charlie's mother soothed him at the start. What's especially insidious is that the good options don't serve Charlie any better. In the bad end, you've got a cute chudette GF until the state kidnaps her, while in the good end, she's gone and the teacher congratulates you for being a good little cog in the machine, before showing you the Prevent process anyway. In the bad end, Charlie's having a good time meeting like-minded people. He's getting involved with politics. In the good end, he's a mindless, sheltered NPC suckling at the teat of the government and the women in his life. Never wondering why things are bad, content with simply drifting through life until he's eventually culturally enriched, as is part and parcel of living in a big city, according to the Pakistani mayor of London, which is currently only a third British and half white. To an adult, Pathways is a joke. I want to save the white race with Amelia, but to an 11-year-old who is shown this in school by his African female teacher during mandatory misogyny class, the takeaway may be different. The game depicts dissident action as cool and socially rewarding because it is. Every day, more and more people are forced to acknowledge the consequences of mass migration and ethnic replacement. That's why they're targeting white kids, telling them that if you're even vaguely interested in pro-white politics, then that's illegal. Okay? Sex with refugees is jasmine-scented and beautiful, and that's why they're shipping in millions of foreign men who will happily demonstrate that to your children, because they hate you, and they hate your kids, and they hate your people, and you aren't even allowed to know that. They'll weaponize the State Department and counterterrorism unit to cram this propaganda down your throat, and when you die, they'll replace you in your own country, upon which they'll salt your grave with the blood and tears of your own children. All that and more for numbers to go up and a delicious bowl of shit-stained curry. But hey, at least you're not speaking German, right?